and all the suffering indigenous populations and the damnable zoological republic are set free. Chineke na nke pụrụ m ihe niile Chukwu okike abịa onye na-efe na aja aha nsọ ya mma mgbe niile. Onye ọbụla na ya na-achị eluigwe n'ụwa na-agba akaebe ịhụnanya gị na ebere gị amara gị n'ọmịiko gị ebe ndị gị na-eze ebede ngọzi. Anyị wee na-etoghị agbanyeghị atụmatụ ọjọọ niile nke ndị iro. Iwe nye anyị ndụ ala nke dị n'uwere n'ụbọchị nke taa. Anyị wee na-asị na ịja mma niile otu niile dịrị aha nsọ gị. Onye ọbụla anyị aka ike niile na ọ gbadara aka ya. Anyị wee na-akpọku gị na-asị gị na nke ọma anyị ga-ekele gị nke ọjọọ ma anyị kelee gị. Anyị wee na-aja gị mma wee na-eto gị wee na-asọpụrụ gị n'isi ụmụ gị niile bụ ndị ikwu ndị wee ezi oku mgbe a kpọrọ ha ka ha wee chekwaa ala nsọ gị bụ Biafra onye nwe m na Chineke na ihe n'ikpere anyị nkwa na o mekataghị ka ndị iro wee were ala nsọ Biafra onye nwe m na Chineke na nke bi n'igwe agbanyeghị atụmatụ ọjọọ niile nke ndị iro ma ndị na-agba mgbagba ebe niile dị iche iche onye nwe m na Chineke nna n'ihere bụ nke ndị dị etu a n'ụbọchị nke taa. Anyị wee na-eto gị wee na-asị onye nwe anyị na Chineke nna nke pụrụ m ihe niile onye ọbụla anyị a na-azọpụta onye ọ bụ naanị ya bụ okwu ya niile bụ ihe na amen. Anyị wee na-asị ezi ebube dị ngọzi na ọtụtụ na ịja mma na nsọpụrụ site n'ebighị ebi ma ruo n'ebighị ebi. Ise ise ise.
Welcome, my amazing viewers. Thank you so much for joining me on my program once again. I appreciate you wherever you are joining from. If you have not subscribed to my channel, please kindly subscribe to my channel. Click the notification bell so that you'll be notified each time I upload a video. You will be among the first to receive it. Thank you so much and remain blessed. If you are joining me from Africa, Asia, Europe, America, Australia, or any part of the world, I thank you very much for your contribution. Please, each time you watch my video, go to the comment section and put down your comments. That is where we learn from each other. We learn a lot from the comment section. I don't speak alone. I am speaking with you. You can equally contribute. You can criticize if you so desire, but do it constructively so that we can learn from one another. That is why we are here. Thank you so much for joining. Remember, you have to say what is happening in your own area. Whatever happens, if you see something, say something. Don't be silent. We cannot allow the conventional media to continue to change the narrative. We cannot allow the conventional media to continue to play down the situation. We will continue to bring the situation the way it is and say it straight the way it is without hating anybody. We are not preaching hate speech. We are not talking down anybody. We say live and let's live. And for those who say we will not live, just like the Fulani Janjaweed have said, they will not live either.
Well, thank you for joining us for the program today. Our first issue is on Nigeria's economy, and definitely something that concerns everyone in every part of Nigeria, both Lagos and wherever, including Abuja, where my colleague Maokwe is this morning. Good morning, Maokwe.
Good morning, Ayos. Always good to see you. Looking rather dapper this morning.
Yes, I need to go to the runway then. Maybe that will boost my personal economy. What do you think?
Well, the CBN is certainly concerned about that. They're concerned about rising food prices and what have you. So anything else you can do to make yourself feel good. And who knows, you know, looking good is good business. It might just attract the right kind of business you're looking for.
Well, it definitely is some people's business. For more on that, Maokwe, this morning we have Mr. Kola Ayeye, who is an economist and Chief Executive Officer of GDL Asset Management Limited. He joins us in the Lagos studio here. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me, and good morning, Maokwe.
It is interesting, all kinds of things always clawing attention, so to speak, but the one that tops the list on this program today is about Nigeria's economy. You are aware of what the CBN has said and all of the conversations going around. The question that one would want to ask is, where you sit from your experience as first as an economist and then as an entrepreneur, how significant do you see those things being in business and in the economy generally? First as an economist, then as a business owner.
Okay. Painfully, we're now probably approaching the end of the 7th year of this regime. By May next year, this regime will have only one more year to go. Soberly and, without disrespect, the performance of the economy under the current regime has been underwhelming. It's been a performance that is phenomenally poor, in my view. I do not think the things that are being contemplated will make major change between now and end of 2023. I don't see it. I think if you look at a lot of the indices, I was just checking when I was coming to the studio today. In 2015, unemployment and underemployment were under 20 million people. It has doubled to almost 40 million. Exchange rate, which was at 190 and 250, is now almost twice that. The number of Nigerians living under poverty has increased, and we are now said to be the poverty capital of the world. Inflation is biting. Prices have gone up through the roof. Nigerians are struggling to survive. So if you actually ask me, I will plead, my suggestion is that we actually need to make an attempt at agenda setting to look at what will need to happen between now and 2023, so that 2023 thereafter will be different. I don't have hope that the trajectory in which we are going is going to improve things for the common man.
Is that because of the policies or the implementation of them?
It is both. Let me tell you one thing I see about the executive. I don't think the president's strongest points is the economy. Very painfully, I think the best advisors, his most trusted advisors, the people who are around him, they're not telling him the truth. So when you see the body language of the president, what I see is that I think he thinks that our comments are from those who don't like him, and that it's not a reflection of how well the government does. I think when you see the president comment about how oil prices crashed and what they've done with infrastructure, you see a man who genuinely believes that we have tried, but they haven't. Now, in any team of 40 ministers, because that is what our constitution imposes on governance, not all those 40 are close to the president. That will be his closet cabinet. Just as I'm sure even in channels, I'm sure Dr. Momo has one or two people. So the people who are closest to him, they are not telling him the truth, that our performance is poor. They are not telling him.
But generally, Mr. Yeye, everybody in the world would point to issues around the economy of every country. Just recently, we hear that even the United States of America had to cough out some palliatives for their people, even in this year. And in fact, right now, I think they are still struggling to pass a kind of palliative budget. I do not remember the name of that one now. So that's global and domestic economies. The challenges are there, and a significant thing that every one of them has been raising is that of COVID-19, the challenge of COVID-19. So that's significant, isn't it?
Sure, it is. But we must always situate things with context. Why is it that in spite of COVID, in spite of reduction in oil price, I still say that we should return a verdict of very poor performance? Listen, I guess for my age, I remember clearly that this economy was grounded for 20 years. The federal government could almost literally not do any capital expenditure because we had $30 billion of debt. You see, under the watch of this government, we have taken external debt from $8 billion to almost $40 billion. We've taken domestic debt to almost 30 trillion from about 10 trillion. And nobody has visibility or transparency about the amount of debt that is in CBN.
But you have also heard the federal government say it's still within the margin of risks.
I don't know who they're talking to. If you have a situation where almost 80% of your revenue, in fact, at a point, 97% of your revenue is being used to service debt, you can't say that's sustainable. Our debt is unsustainable. I'm saying, remember, from about 1985 until the Obasanjo regime paid debt, $30 billion kept this economy under. And in fact, in order to pay it, we got $12 billion of forgiveness. And then we used $18 billion of windfall to pay it. We had $40 billion. This is unsustainable. And then, you know, you don't get the economy to this level of borrowing. And you know what has happened? GDP per capita from 2015 to date has reduced. And you know, so that we don't even bore people with figures, stop talking about GDP. Talk about the person on the street. Are they living better? They are not. You see, painfully, those 4, 5, 6 ministers who are the president's most trusted men, this is not what they are telling him.
Now, my apologies, Mr. Yeye. Is it to say that the government, whether at the federal, okay, we'll come to the state split. Is it to say that government is not doing anything at all? Is it to say that government is not even making any attempt at denting the figures?
You know, in my first few years in primary school, I was a truant. I literally went to school to play football. You know, I didn't pay attention. Okay. But I had some colleagues who worked hard. But some of those who worked hard failed as much as I did. You see, if your son, because he's read very hard, if he comes home and has a 20% score, it is still 20%. Mr. President is not short on good intentions. We are saying that today, the average Nigerian is much worse off today than it was in 2015, and that the excuse of COVID is not enough because this government has borrowed massively to make up for that COVID, and that in spite of the borrowing, we still can't see progress.
Okay. Now, there are a number of things that the CBN president, the CBN governor said in that address, you know, concerning the impact. Just before we take it to my colleague in Abuja, he talked about the gradual diversification of the economy and increased contribution of the non-oil sector to government revenues. And he's spoken about the impact of poor infrastructure on rising domestic price levels. And he's talked about the fact that government needs to prioritize investment in public utilities. That's still talking about infrastructure. And specifically, talking about infrastructure, the business environment, transportation networks, power supply, education, and health. And these are some of the areas in which the CBN itself has intervened. Those haven't been significant in your opinion?
There is a right way to do a right thing, and there is a wrong way to do the wrong thing, to do the right thing. And if you do the right thing in the wrong way, you get the wrong result. Let's take 2 examples. And it's common and overflowed. Ayo. We had 750,000 telephone lines. We needed to sort it out. It did not cost the federal government a penny. In fact, the federal government made money. It sold licenses. Those licenses contributed to the federation account. It did not borrow a kobo. In addition, investors brought money to roll out our telecoms networks. And where are we today? We're at over 100 million lines. The model of funding infrastructure with unsustainable debt does not make sense. Ayo, do you know there are Nigerians who suffer today because they wake up, Lagosians, because they wake up in Ota and they have to come in public transport in order to work in VI? You think they don't want a car? It is because they look at the reality of their finances and they say, I cannot afford a car. It is not that I don't know that this is too much hardship. We have gone through implementing infrastructure in the wrong way. You can't put a nation who is still monoproduct dependent. You can't rack up foreign debt, you know, and kick the ball down the road for subsequent governments and subsequent generations to pay it because you want to celebrate a rail line.
So what's the option?
The option is that you create models to attract the private sector, to bring their money to do it.
Okay. Let's take some questions from my colleague in Abuja. Malcolm.
Well, a few of the options which you are now saying were available to the government is what you are now bringing up. For instance, the rail line, which has been funded heavily through debt, through loans, so to speak. But then, you know, apart from COVID, which for a number of people would have said, you know, dealt a very heavy blow to to governments all over the world. There's also the question of the fact that before now, and even still now, we're heavily dependent on oil. And this administration has, excuse me, made a case that when they came into office, oil prices had slumped. There were very little savings in the accounts, if any at all, and that they had to, start from scratch for some of the projects that they had envisaged. For you, and when you think about the challenges that they had in front of them, some people argue that it could have been a lot worse. You don't think so?
A lot worse. A student who scored 20 could have scored 5. The fact that you didn't score 5 does not mean we should celebrate 20%. It could have been a lot worse. But let's also face it, it could have been a lot better. Let me take one example, even taking the example of rail. How do you spend $1.5 or $2 billion on a rail project, and none of us can point to Nigerian enterprises that have become big because of the services and the participation in the execution of that rail? How do you spend that kind of amount of money in a manner that is so delinked? There are no linkages at all with the economy. So that $2 billion debt is money that we borrow, and it's just gone. I have not met one Nigerian entrepreneur who says in the last 5 years, because I was substantially engaged on some of these projects, my business is now empty. And that is why you are borrowing huge amounts. You are spending them, and there is no impact on employment. There is no impact on incomes. You know, one of the funny things we do? Every Wednesday.
Mr.
Yes.
Just a moment. You know the nature of the kinds of loans that we got, and you know the country from whom we've received these loans. Usually, we've been told that they are pretty low interest rate loans, but they come with conditions. Conditions that if we really wanted the rail lines, we might need to, go with, which we've done. And so it's very difficult. I mean, they oftentimes bring their own personnel with them to be able to develop the lines. When we brought up this argument, we were told, that they leave certain cadre of work to, Nigerian workers. But this is what we have. Were the options really very open to us in terms of where we got the loans and how we carried out this job?
We didn't have to take the loans. Mark, but I'm saying again, no country should take a loan that has no linkage at all to your economy. You shouldn't take a loan where everything that is used is brought from abroad, the materials are bought from abroad, the people are bought from abroad. You are left with a loan burden, and you have not made any Nigerian better off. No.
Okay, let's flip it now. Let's flip it now. Some people will say that we've tried a few other models. Let's bring in electricity, which we've decided will be almost 100% local. We gave distribution companies, or we sold off distribution companies to local entrepreneurs. We sold off generation companies, or we even asked more private companies to come up with generation. The only one that the federal government has kept majority shares in is transmission company. Yet, we're still where we are. Now, there's now talk of, should we, take a second look at how the privatization was done with the distribution companies. There are all manners of conversation. For the examples that we have, where we have brought in local players, have we been able to prove that local players really do make a difference with the results that they produce?
Okay, Mark, a very valid point. Development is tough. Development is not easy. And when whatever you are implementing, you must implement it end to end correctly. I'm going to be very obvious. I'm going to be very frank. The counterparties that the Jonathan administration favored with the oil sector with the energy privatization were very weak counterparties. They brought very little to the table, not capital, not skills. The electricity privatization came to the table on the assumption that people have made a lot of money from telecoms, and power is going to be the next honey in the cookie jar. So with the power privatization, number one, you got the parties wrong. You selected Nigerians. Those were not the right Nigerians. With respect, save for one or two. The second thing is that the policy itself we've seen is wrong. The power privatization was based on, let us, in order to ensure that we don't concentrate economic power in a few hands, let us separate generation from transmission and from distribution. It doesn't work. It hasn't worked. Unlike the telecoms privatization, Econet or MTN or Airtel or Glo, they are not beholden to anybody to deliver their airwaves end to end. So it's not enough to say that we want to engage Nigerians. We must have a transparent process that engages the right Nigerians who have some capital and who can bring in the right partners. Those were not the people who gave the electricity privatization. Those people still owe the Nigerian banking industry huge sums of money, which they have not been able to pay. Huge. I mean, look at what has happened since privatization. You go around. How many places have they done substations? How many additional substations have they done? How many more engineers have they employed? You don't give people who lack capacity huge assets and then say that sector is not working. You also don't go into a sector with the wrong policies. You know, and I'm not fixated on Nigerians. In fact, electricity is one in which I think that we need to go back and cancel it. And for electricity, what we should do is do an end-to-end bid. And I don't care now whether it is Siemens or whether it is GE. We should say to people, who will pay you $10 billion. We will pay you how much of electricity you generate every day. But it's no longer our business how you generate and transmit it. Get us electricity to the end user. Ayo, I want to say this again. It's something I want to say and I want you to sing. The way we should sort out electricity is that those who owe Nigerian banks because they bought electricity companies and they've not been able to pay it, we should tell the banks to go after them and cancel that privatization.
Now, what happens to power sector, power supply?
The power supply now, what we're going to do, Ayo, what we're going to do is that Siemens, GE, and any Nigerian company that can bid, and I'm going to tell you where this has worked in Nigeria, any Nigerian company that can bid should say, see, in 5 years, we want 10,000 megawatts of power. Not generated, delivered to the end user. And we will get you an international bank guarantee that shows you that the power that you deliver to the end user will be paid for every day. The next 5 years, we want you to move it from 10,000 megawatts to 15 or 20,000 megawatts. So they will do it. Let me tell you about the contract I read. I was still a young boy. Do you know the NLNG? The power contract for NLNG gave it to a Nigerian company with a foreign partner. And far back then, the contract said if power blinks one day, the fine is $1 million per day. You know why? Power doesn't blink. They didn't do it abroad. They did it here. If Siemens or GE or any Nigerian company says it can deliver 10,000 megawatts to end user, let us pay them what it will cost them.
So is that a problem with the contracts that was signed? I mean, still looking at this power sector privatizing. Is there a problem with the contract signed?
You see, the problem, first of all, I have said that, and you know, sometimes with benefit of hindsight, we all have 20/20 vision. If something is wrong, let us say so. First of all, I say it without equivocation. There may be one or two exceptions. Most of the counterparties that we gave the power companies to lack capacity.
I asked that question
advisedly.
Just a second,
Yes.
Mr. Malpo is still on the floor, but
Yes.
I asked that question advisedly. I remember while I think maybe at the time he was Minister of Power as well, Mr. Fashola said there was a need to reconsider, to take a look at those contracts, to give those contracts a second look. So that's why I'm asking, is there a problem with the contracts that we signed? Because you talked about a punitive clause, so to speak, go put into, one contract with a company that is supplying power where NLNG is now. So is there a problem with the contracts? Because there are those who say that if we cancel the contracts, we are going to be very liable as a country.
We don't need to cancel the contract. CBN just needs to tell the banks, take over the companies. The companies owe the banks and they're in default. There are many ways to skin a cat. Those companies owe Nigerian banks about 1 trillion naira.
Don't forget that
The banks will call in the facilities, they don't pay, you take them over. Once you take them over, then you can start another bidding process.
We're taking a short break shortly, but don't forget that you are on one hand advocating for private sector participation. On the other hand, you are putting a chain on their necks.
I'm advocating for competent private sector participation. You know what the private sector is known for? The private sector is known for, when you give me a job, I deliver. If I don't deliver, I face the consequences. We don't baby coddle private sector. If nobody begged people to bid, if you didn't do your due diligence well and you bought companies on time that is not working, you live up to the consequences of what you bought. That is what the private sector is about.
Okay, let's take a short break now for some messages. We'll be right back. Thanks for joining us again. Just before I throw it back to Abuja, of course, some of the messages on the slides that we just sent in, Mr. Ayeye, talk about the rising cost of cooking gas. And we've listened to several people. The governor of Delta State that says, advises that it should be addressed, arrested. The price increase should be arrested. And we've also listened to the Minister of State for Petroleum, who says it's dollar rated and all of that. So there is little or nothing government can do about it. At the time when we are talking about the National Gas Expansion Program, what's your take?
You know, government is about getting the largest amount of good to the largest number of people. When over a long period, you have not managed things well, the things you are supposed to do, you then find out you can't do it. You know, things like gas, you know, because we want to increase usage, we want people not to go back to firewood and charcoal, you know, and in a time when purchasing power is so constrained, we should ideally not leave the average Nigerian to the vagaries of market forces when that thing is going through the roof.
What should government do?
Unfortunately, this government is incapacitated.
But what is it that government should do?
In right times, there are things that affect life. That you either have buffers in terms of reserve stocks, or from your own reserve funds, when those prices are beyond what you believe is sustainable, you subsidize it. Those are one of your two options. So, for example, sometimes you have grain reserves. When prices of grains are grown too high, you flood the market with grains. That's one way. The second way is to say, it shouldn't be this hard for people to live. If it reaches this up to this price, government will pick up the tab. It's one of these two. But can this government pick up any tab now? It's a government that has borrowed itself to the hilt, and that is owing a whole lot.
Well, you have to give us some solutions. But let me throw it back to my colleague in Abuja. Marco, your questions.
Well, for me, I think you're right on track, because some people will argue that we still have 1 year and 4 months, as you have pointed out, of this administration. And there's still work to be done. Right now, they're saying, we're going to be seeing Air Nigeria. Is it Nigeria Air now? Air Nigeria, one of the two of them. An airline, that's what we're supposed to be getting in 2022, sometime in April. So it would seem that there are still promises that they're yet to fulfill, and something for us to hope for in the days to come. So as we look forward to Air Nigeria coming, what are your thoughts, practical thoughts, in terms of what this administration can begin to do? They are saying they want to take away subsidy, even though there's always been argument as to whether or not there was. Now they say, it was under recovery. Oh no, we've actually put it in the budget now. Whatever it is, we are going to be paying the actual price of petrol in the next few months. And they are now thinking of palliatives. There are going to be consequences for that. So a lot of things coming up. To your mind, as one who is also very concerned about the economy, are we on the right track with that? And is that one of the probable solutions that you see to government getting out of the huge debt which is sunk itself in, and trying to really get the economy back on track?
Okay, I'll comment, but Mark, if you permit me, can you give me 1 second just to comment on Air Nigeria? Air Nigeria, as conceived, will not work.
Let's go ahead.
It will not work. You don't treat symptoms, you treat fundamentals. You see, the aviation sector needs fundamental reform. First of all, you can't have a situation where anybody who goes to Bulgaria buys 2 overused planes, engines which are several decades old, can come and compete by getting licenses. And it's going to be pricing in the same market where people are trying to buy new Boeings. So you need to reform the air sector. Some of the studies based on expert reviews, which I have seen, Nigeria cannot, you need, first of all, to raise the standards. So you need to say, over a 2 to 3 year period, to operate in the Nigerian airspace, you need a minimum number of planes, and that should not be less than 10, and that your planes should not be older than this age. You know what you're doing? You are leaving the space for strong players. And it is those strong players you start to direct towards creating strong players. Over there in AMCON already has a number of airlines. It has Aero. It has ARIC. It is those 2 airlines that the federal government should work with AMCON towards creating 1 or 2 strong dominant players. Apart from South Africa, there is only 1 airline in Africa that is doing extremely well, Ethiopia. In Ethiopia, Ethiopia Airline is the dominant airline. You can't have a situation where you have these 1 dozen, 2 dozen operators. You can't chase them away, but you can create an environment that just leaves strong ones. Now, coming to the issue of subsidy, I believe in government that is pro-people. And the first point we need to make is that any government that does not choose what it will subsidize is not worth its name. Today, in Europe, almost $45 billion is paid to farmers as subsidies. In America, it's about $20 billion. You must choose what to subsidize. And whenever there is subsidy, there is potential for abuse. In any country, So what that means is that a government must not only subsidize, a government must put in all the checks to ensure that subsidy is not stolen or misappropriated. That said, we can no longer afford PMS subsidy. It's a pity, but it's the truth. We can't afford it, and it is time to take it away. But it is inflationary. It's going to spike up inflation. And so what are you going to do? You want to create palliatives. We need to ask the Minister of Humanitarian Affairs, who maybe over the last 2 years may have received up to 1 trillion naira, to come and account for how that 1 trillion was spent, even if it's just for the purpose of learning. If we did not administer that subsidy well, if it ended up in the wrong pockets, even this one is going to end up in the wrong pockets. So the first thing is that, you know, why was the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs carrying palliatives around in cash? It's not enough for the Minister of Finance to just come and say it's going to be digitally done. You know, we must have a culture of accountability. The one we did, what was the result? What mistakes did we make? What reparations can we make? And then if we're going to pay 5,000, what is the process for identifying those who are deserving and for ensuring that they get it? I don't have a problem, particularly because it's time-bound. Because government also cannot afford it indefinitely. So if it is 6 months, 12 months, okay. But you know what my problem is? If I look at how inefficiently, I do not want to use the word corruptly, the palliatives for the COVID regime was managed, I have very strong fears. And our legislature is behaving as if it is the president's fans club.
No,
anything that the president sends anything that the president sends is approved.
The Senate is also
before the president approves it, before the Senate and the House approves it, they just say, okay, we've approved a lot of palliatives in the last 2 years. Let us audit it. Even if we are not sending anyone to jail, let us find out the money we intended to use as palliative, where was it supposed to go? Where did it go? Who got what he was not supposed to get, and who got what he was supposed to get? So what corrections are you going to make? So how do you assure us that this 5,000 naira per month per person will get to the right person? Okay. Then we are talking.
Okay. Well, I would like us to leave here with some takeaways.
Yes.
If you were to set agenda for government, in terms of first of all, in what areas would you want to set that agenda? We have a challenge with poverty figures. We have a challenge with unemployment figures. We have a challenge with inflation figures. We have a challenge with prices of commodities. So in terms of setting agenda, which of these would you want to prioritize?
Thank you very much, Ayo. I actually think the agenda we need to set is for Nigerians. We are poor and we are suffering. First of all, because our politics is wrong. The agenda we need to start setting is that before 2023, why isn't Ayo and Chamberlain and Maokwe and Kola, the people in the middle class, why have we remained bystanders in politics?
Why is that significant?
Because the reason where we are at, it's because our politics is wrong. You know what happens in Nigeria's politics? The thin middle class and the elite class play the role of bystanders. And so the Nigerian politics is an engagement between the ruling class and the masses. And that ruling class perverts the masses. You and I need to do more than get PVCs. The parties, we need to get involved. We need to go into the parties and we need to participate. Number two, I think we need a credible alternative to PDP and APC, even if they will not win. That we need to set that agenda, that there is need for an alternative. So we are suffering because our politics is wrong. What's the second thing that is wrong? Our morals and our values are wrong. What are the things we need to take out of our morals? Number one, I am a believer that this country will not progress until we conquer corruption. Number two, you know what is wrong about our values? We need to go back to merit. Affirmative action in terms of federal quota. We've done it for 50 years. It hasn't worked. It is now the time for merit to become the order of society. It is immoral to have a policy that for decades says that somebody who scores 10% can be better than somebody who scores 70%. So our morals are wrong. You know, and also in terms of morals, there needs to be a constitutional change. You know this, you know, lawyers have something they call jurisprudence. It is the basis of laws. Jurisprudence needs to be related to the cultural context. The jurisprudence we have, we inherited it from the colonialists. It works for them, it doesn't work for us. I was brought up a Yoruba boy, so I know some Yoruba proverbs. There's a Yoruba proverb that says that Omoyin o shagbafo, onkashowale, eroju ole, emu. That says that the jurisprudence that works for us is that when you are living with money and assets that is beyond what your income can support, we come and tell you to justify it. We don't go to court with this current adversarial nature that says you are innocent until proven guilty. My salary, they know my salary in my company. If I come to work with a car that I cannot afford, I should be assumed to be a thief. And this is the constitutional and jurisprudential basis of law in Singapore. That is how Singapore conquered corruption. So number one, our politics must change. Our morals must change. We need a merit-based society. And then, you know, we must take lies out of our society. You know, we are not 200 million people. We are not. It's a bloody lie. Let's have a right population figure. You know, these are fundamental things.
But that's why there's a head count next year.
What I'm saying is that let us do it right. You know, the third thing. So I'm saying our politics must be right. You and I, why shouldn't an accomplished person like Dr. John Momo? I was in Oceanic Bank when Dr. John Momo came to borrow the first naira to set up channels. I was even afraid that the thing will fail. See what he has built. Why aren't those the people we are voting for? Why are we voting for people who are telling us bloody lies? Why are we telling ourselves to just go and get PVC? Why must we go and get PVC to vote for the wrong people?
But how long will this, all these morals...
We have a little, you see, the most critical thing...
How long will it take before we get to...
You know why I'm saying this? Quite frankly, there is an election, a governorship election in Ekiti, mid next year. And there is a governorship election in Osun, December. I wish we would get to work now, so that an alternative will at least show there is hope for an alternative by those elections.
How should we go about it?
You really want to hear me?
Yes, how should we go about this,
the worst thing that happened, in my view, happened around the best thing. Since 1999, I did not see a 2-week or 3-week period where Nigerians, locally and in diaspora, were as proud and happy as they were than when young people who were at Lekki during the Endsars riots showed us Nigeria can work. You know my pain about that thing? I could see that was the seed of a transformation to a movement that was going to unseat my generation. We need to tell those young people, we are sorry, but please stop protesting. Start organizing. Kick us out of office. You still have the time. The momentum I saw in those two, weren't you alarmed? Weren't you proud? On Friday, when Muslims want to pray, at the Lekki, the Christians will move back. In the evening, when the Christians want to have all night, the Muslims will say, we are watching over you. In this Nigeria, the clerk, the MD, the manager who came there, if you wanted to eat rice, they were on the same queue. There wasn't one special rice for the MD and another kind of rice. You see, those young people gave me hope. We need, and you know the generation that is most complicit, my generation. Those of us born from 1950 to 1970. We saw a Nigeria that you didn't see. I went to best schools, best public schools. I went to Government College Ibadan, not because my father was rich, but because I passed the entrance exam. I went to University of Nigeria, I graduated with accounting. I was confident I could hold my own against any accounting graduate anywhere in the world. But that generation of those of us born from 1950 to 1970, we have been so politically inept. And we are living in Nigeria that is hopeless. You know what our generation needs to do? We now need to encourage those young people. Okay. Those young people who are at that gate, tell them, stop protesting. Give us a third force. Nigeria is waiting. So it is that third force that will come and back this change.
Okay.
That's my view. We need to change our politics. We need to change our structure. We need to change our morals. We need to change our structure. And in order to back the structure, those young people, we must plead with them to get involved.
I believe that they themselves are listening to you right now, and I can only hope that from here on, we'll begin to hear good things from them as well, because everyone is tired, but then someone has to bear the cards. Kola Ayeye, economist and CEO, GDL Asset Management Limited. Thank you so much for your time again.
Thank you very much, Ayo. And it's always a pleasure to come onto the channels platform. Channels is one of those forums that show us that we can build things which work. And I continue to encourage you and wish you the very best.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your patience to watch from the beginning to the end. I hope you have learned something from the video you have just watched. The video you have just watched is to bring information to your doorstep and for educational purpose. It is not to demonize anybody. Let us watch continuously and see who can be able to make a sense out of every nonsense we are seeing. We must continue. We move. It doesn't matter what they do. It doesn't matter what they say. They will kill us. We will kill them. At the end of the day, Biafra is here. Thank you for watching. If you have not subscribed to the channel, please kindly subscribe to the channel. Click the notification bell so that you're notified each time I upload a video. You will be among the first to receive it. Thank you and remember blessed. Bye-bye. See you again.